Hey everybody, Mark Green here, the Diabetes Diet Guy, bringing you free information about how to lower your blood glucose levels and live long and healthy, sustainable lives. If you haven't done so already, head over to diabetesdietguy.com, where we talk about how to manage your diabetes, but a whole bunch of other things looking at nutrition and diet and long-term health. So even if you don't have diabetes, there's probably something there for you. Now today I'm talking about whether or not you should eat red meat if you're trying to lose weight. Now the motivation and inspiration for this video came from listening to a Joe Rogan podcast very recently. And he was talking about how he cannot see how eating something fresh and as nutritious as bison can be a bad thing. Now obviously not many people in the UK are probably eating fresh bison because they're not hunters like Joe is, but actually we can extrapolate that and look at red meats as a general category, and specifically things like steak, which tends to be a staple of our diet. So I'm going to jump in and discuss the different considerations around this and actually whether or not you should be eating red meat regularly if you're trying to lose weight. So let's jump right in. Well, it's an interesting concept, isn't it? Because actually a lot of the times I speak with patients, they will actually say I've cut out red meat if they're trying to lose weight, almost like it's a badge of honor. So it's obviously something we recognize as a health message that red meat is bad for us. But really, the first thing we need to do is think about the different types of red meat, because there's lots of different types, and they all come in different nutritional compositions. So for example, if I said to you things like pork, we know that's quite a fatty cut of meat, and typically when we're eating it, it comes in the format of sausages, bacon, those kinds of foods. Obviously, sometimes you can have like a pork chop, say, which is going to be healthier, but I don't think it takes, I don't think it being used to many people, or most people would identify sausages and bacon and foods like that as unhealthy, kind of like a treat food of a weekend. So really, when we're talking about should you be eating red meat, really we're excluding those foods and talking about the more standard foods in the diet, like steak, or lamb or pork chops, or foods like that that regularly will feature on the dinner plate, that actually there might be some debate about and actually there might be some confusion about. So that's what we're talking about here. So let's take steak as an example then. Steak packs an almighty nutritional punch. It is high in protein, which is why a lot of the personal trainers like it, because obviously they're going to resistance train quite regularly, so they're breaking down muscle. Protein helps build muscle, and vis-a-vis, they tend to eat a lot of protein. So the way they can do that is eat foods that are high in protein, and steak is one of the highest. So it makes sense. A perfect marriage, if you will. But steak is also very high in fat. Now obviously if you're burning up calories, it's neither here nor there really, because you're just replacing what you've already burned up. But as a result of having high fat content, it's also very high in calories. So an average steak, obviously there's some variation, but it's about 500 calories. So actually it packs quite a big hit of energy packed into a nice little slab of meat. Now, the other thing that steak does provide is quite a lot of micronutrients. So it's very high in magnesium, zinc, B12, and also iron. So really, when we're thinking about red meat, probably the micronutrient we associate it with most commonly is iron. Now, iron helps with the transportation of oxygen around the body, and therefore people that are deficient in iron or anemic tend to feel quite out of breath when they're moving and tend to feel quite tired. Now, micronutrient deficiencies are quite rare in the UK, but iron is definitely one we see quite commonly. It doesn't always mean that they're not eating enough iron, there can be other reasons, but it can be one of the reasons. So if we're looking at this debate from an iron perspective, really, you probably only need to be eating red meat once or twice a week to get all the iron you need. So from that perspective, absolutely eat the red meat, no debate about that. But it's more about then the frequency of how often you're having this red meat, and whether or not you should believe the other videos online about how often these foods should feature in your diet, and actually are they as healthy as you think they are. So in order to do that, we really need to apply some context. So just then I spoke about personal trainers, and even Joe Rogan, he is a martial arts fan and regularly trains. So these people are fit individuals, they are regularly using up calories, they are breaking down muscle through frequent resistance training. So the best way to lose weight, without a shadow of a doubt, and I've done a video on this, it's called the Blueprint to Weight Loss, is getting as active as possible, mixing both cardio and resistance training, and then replacing what you've used up with good quality nutrition. And part of that would be, yes, steak or red meat. No doubt about it, that's my preferred way. So if there's any comments below, just make sure you tune into that fact. That's the best way. But, and there's a big but, most people don't do that. They don't. We know most people are sedentary. We know that we have an obesity problem in the Western world, definitely in the UK. And so what this creates then is when you're not being as active as you need to be in order to accommodate certain foods in the diet, you get locked into this diet culture, because then you start to have to modify the diet to create the appropriate negative energy balance in order to lose weight. Now, this is a battle that you're going to struggle to win, because essentially what you're doing is depriving yourself. And if you're depriving yourself, it's not going to be long-term and a long-term solution. And if it's not a long-term solution, you're really going to struggle to stick with it, aren't you? So just keep that in mind as we're going through here, because most people aren't doing that approach. They're not doing the personal training approach. So then the question is, if you're not being very active, is there a place for a food that might take up 500 calories on the dinner plate? Particularly if you've not changed anything else in your diet. I'm assuming they're not eating lots of sweets and cakes and biscuits and crisps. Let's say they've cut those out. But if you've got 250 calories of rice on the plate, plus a 500 calorie steak, and the meals you've had at the other meals in the day are also fairly calorific, and you're not burning up much calories in general, then you can see how problems start to emerge. Now, of course, we can start to change things in the diet to accommodate the steak, for example, or the red meat. So let's say you cut out carbohydrates or starchy foods. But then that changes the question, doesn't it? Because then it's not about should you eat steak, it's about should you eat carbohydrates. Because then you're accommodating the steak by cutting out the carbohydrates. By putting those back in, then you probably need to do something with the steak or somewhere else in the diet. So you can see how this is all related. So as you change one thing, something else will need to change. So that's one way to think about this. Now, the other thing as well is when we're talking about good quality nutrition, you know, if we could go back to our hunter-gatherer ancestors, steak was a great find. Like red meat, find a corpse or a carcass, or go hunt something and bring down some game, then you know you're going to be eating well that day. So you wanted to pack as much nutrition in as physically possible. So that was a good thing, because you didn't know when the next meal was going to come. But these days we can eat whenever we want. I could literally phone up an Uber Eats driver or Deliveroo, Just Eat, or all the other companies out there and have a McDonald's on my lap in 25 minutes. It's so easy to eat now, it's unreal. We never go without. So we don't need to be packing ourselves full of these high quality or, let me rephrase that, energy dense foods regularly, if you're not then burning up the energy elsewhere. So then you're better off going down the leaner sources of those protein foods. So like chicken breast, turkey breast, corn, beans, pulses, lentils. You're better off utilizing those foods more often than not, and then having the red meat for your iron stores once a week, twice a week tops, but ideally choosing a lower fat option, unless you're going to change your approach and get active, and then you can accommodate it, or change something else which then allows you to accommodate it. So hopefully that's starting to make sense. So I'm just going to wrap up, guys, because I can see the time on the video and I don't want this to go on too long, and I think I've got most of the salient points across. So just to summarize, red meat is a very nutrient dense form of nutrition. But in modern society, we probably don't need that as often as we did when we were roaming the savannah and we were hunter-gatherers, or for someone that is physically burning up that energy regularly, such as athletes, personal trainers, or just people that are very consistent with their resistance and cardio routines. If you're not that person, then other than nutrients like for iron, you don't need to be eating these foods regularly. You'd be much better off with the lower fat, lower calorie options, just to create the appropriate negative energy balance to help you lose weight. If you are too frequently eating high calorie foods in your diet, they're going to add up, accumulate, and stop you from losing weight. Now, like I say, I don't like the diet culture. I don't like depriving yourself. The better way of doing it is getting active and trying to use up energy to then allow you to eat good, nutrient-dense foods back into your body, which then helps to replenish what you've used up, and you will find that much more sustainable longer term. But the problem is most people don't do that, and so if you are hell-bent on not getting active, then there's only one other way of doing it, and that is dietary manipulation, and therefore something's got to give. So yes, you can change the diet to accommodate these higher fat foods, but that's when you're going down the lower carb keto route, which is fine for some people, but most people I speak to find it unsustainable and don't really like doing it. And you know, I've done other videos on that. You can go check them out on the blog or on my YouTube channel here. So really, that's just one way of thinking about it, really. So yes, absolutely eat it, but it also depends what else you're doing, which tends to be quite a frequent occurrence when it comes to nutrition. Thanks for listening, guys. If you found that useful, remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. I post quite regularly when I can, and if you really want to know when I'm posting, turn on the notifications, as you will then get a notification, obviously. If you haven't done so already, check out the blog, diabetesdietguide.com. Loads of information on there, and if you need an extra helping hand with your diabetes management or weight loss, then we have programs on there. They're pretty cheap, £90, considering a usual personal training session would be £40 or £50. It's all there for you. It lays it out what you need to do. Or if you need an extra helping hand, we also do consultancy services. So I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you later.